My name is Célestine Savatier. I'm 31. I teach fourth grade at a public school in East Los Angeles. I make $54,000 a year before tax. And 4 months ago, my father told me he wanted 20% of our wedding gift money in exchange for walking me down the aisle. That's not the worst part. The worst part is, I almost said yes. Roland Savatier built his whole identity around one word: provider. He said it the way other men say hero, like it gave him something, like it meant the rest of us owed him. Growing up, everything in our house had a price. Not money, exactly, something worse. Gratitude, silence, never pushing back. My brother Luke turned 21, and Dad threw a backyard party, catered, 30 people, a card on the table with $500 cash inside. I turned 21 and got a phone call. 12 seconds. Happy birthday. Don't stay up too late. I paid my own way through college, every cent. I worked weekends at a diner in Pasadena, doubled shifts through summers, ate gas station food between classes. Dad never offered $1. Not for books, not for my credential program, not once. "You're going to be a teacher?" he said when I told him my major. His voice had that flat tone, the one it meant he'd already decided what something was worth. That's not exactly setting the world on fire, Célestine. I smiled, said nothing, picked up an extra shift that weekend. That was the first thing Dad taught me. His love had conditions, and I hadn't met them yet. I met Theo at a school fundraiser. He was there with a colleague, quiet in the corner, holding a paper cup of bad coffee like he didn't know what to do with it. I asked him what he did. He said surgeon, the same way someone else might say accountant. No performance, no pause waiting for a reaction. We dated for a year before I told him about Dad, about the way Roland talked over me at family dinners, about how he introduced Luke as my son, he runs his own business, and introduced me as my daughter, she works with kids. Theo listened to all of it. When I finished, he said, "That's not okay." 3 words. I had waited 31 years. When Theo proposed, I cried so hard he thought something was wrong. Nothing had ever been more right. I called Dad that same evening. He said, "Congratulations." Then he asked where the reception was. I told him, a historic mansion in Pasadena, about 110 guests. He went quiet for a second. Then, "Célestine, a venue like that, people are going to bring real money in those envelopes. I think we need to talk about how the family handles that." I thought I'd misheard him. I hadn't. "Dad, what are you saying?" His voice stayed flat, casual, like he was explaining something obvious. "I'm saying I'm your father. I put years into raising you. I think 20% of the gift money is fair, especially since you're marrying someone who clearly isn't hurting for cash." I stood in my kitchen completely still. "And if I say no?" He paused, just long enough. "Then I'll still show up. I'll sit front row, and everyone there will watch you walk down that aisle alone, every single person." He hung up. I didn't move for a long time, and that was the moment I stopped trying to earn something that was never going to be free. What I didn't know yet, what Dad had no idea about, was who Theo actually was. In 4 weeks, the whole room would find out. Has someone in your family put a price on their love? Drop a comment below and subscribe.
Theo found me sitting in the kitchen floor. Not crying, just sitting,
back against the cabinet, phone face down on the tiles, staring at the wall. He sat down next to me. Didn't ask, didn't rush, just waited. I told him everything. Dad's exact words. 20%, return on investment, front row. Theo listened without moving. When he finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" Not, "What should we do?" Not, "I'll handle this." What do you want? I didn't have an answer yet, but something shifted in his eyes. Not anger, something quieter, more deliberate. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. Dad's first real meeting with Theo happened 5 weeks before the wedding, Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Glendale. Theo wore a plain gray shirt and jeans, nothing that said anything. He wanted to make a good impression, he told me, not a statement. Mom had cooked. She was moving around the kitchen the way she always did when Dad was in a mood. Busy hands, quiet eyes. Dad sat at the head of the table already performing. He'd invited his brother Gerard and Gerard's wife without telling me. An audience. Dad always needed an audience. He shook Theo's hand at the door. Slow and firm. The kind of handshake that was really a measurement. "So," Dad said, dropping into his chair, "what do you do?" "I'm a doctor," Theo said. "What kind?" "Surgeon." "Good. Money in that?" Theo smiled. "Enough to take care of your daughter." Dad's eyes moved to me for just a second, something calculating behind them. "What kind of surgery?" "Reconstructive, mostly trauma and burn patients." "So not cosmetic." Dad leaned back. "Not the real money stuff." The table went quiet. Theo didn't flinch. "No, not cosmetic." "Still," Dad picked up his fork, "a surgeon's a surgeon. Célestine did all right for herself." He said it like I'd gotten lucky, like Theo was something that had happened to me rather than someone I'd chosen and who had chosen me back. Mom put rolls on the table. Gerard's wife asked about the wedding venue. Dinner moved on. But I watched Dad for the rest of that meal. The way he kept pulling the conversation back to money, property values in Pasadena, whether Theo owned his practice or worked for a hospital, what his parking situation was like, of all things. Theo answered everything, calm, gave just enough, never more. On the drive home, I asked him, "Did any of that bother you?" He thought about it, honestly, a real pause, not a polite one. "No, but I noticed everything." 2 weeks later, Dad called me on a Tuesday morning while I was grading papers. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about the wedding planning. He got straight to it. "I've been thinking. Theo seems like a serious man, which means you both understand how the real world works. So my ask is simple. Not cash up front, just 20% of whatever comes in through the gift envelopes on the day. That's it. That's all I'm asking." "Dad, I raised you for 18 years, Célestine. That counts for something. And if I say no again?" His voice didn't change, not even slightly. "Then I sit in that front row and I let every person in that room draw their own conclusions about why I'm not standing beside you. And when they ask me after, I'll tell them my side of it." Not just embarrassing me anymore, rewriting the whole story, making himself the hurt father, making me the daughter who turned cold, who chose a stranger, who forgot where she came from. I hung up. That night, Theo was in his home office, door half open. I walked past with a stack of lesson plans and caught the tail end of his phone call. His voice was low, steady, the voice he used at work. "I need everyone confirmed by the 10th. Yes, the full list. And listen, she doesn't know. I want to keep it that way until the day." I stopped just outside the door. She doesn't know. I kept walking, didn't turn around, didn't ask, because in 2 years, Theo had never once given me a reason not to trust him. But I won't pretend I wasn't scared of what was coming. Dad thought he had the whole thing figured out. He had no idea what was already being put in motion. 4 days before the wedding, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. I was looking for a stapler in Theo's home office, second drawer on the left. I pulled it open, and underneath a folder was a printed email, folded in half. I almost put it back. I didn't. The subject line read, "Attendance confirmation, Savatier Moreau wedding, Pasadena." It was a reply from someone named Dr. Patricia Owens, 4 lines. Confirmed, 14 colleagues plus myself will arrive no later than 3:30. Formal attire as requested. Should we introduce ourselves to the venue coordinator or wait for your signal? 15 doctors arriving together. Formal attire. Waiting for a signal. I folded it exactly as I'd found it, put it back under the folder, closed the drawer. I found the stapler in the next drawer down. I sat with that email for 4 days and said absolutely nothing. Dad called Wednesday, 2 days out. No greeting, straight to it. "Have you thought about what I said?" "Yes." "And?" "My answer is still no, Dad." A long pause. When he came back, his voice was different, slower, like he was choosing each word. "Célestine, I want you to understand something. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm your father. I have every right to be at that wedding, and I will be there, front row. But if you've decided to disrespect me like this, then everyone in that room is going to see exactly what kind of daughter you turned out to be. And when they ask me why I'm sitting down instead of walking beside you, I will tell them the truth. My truth. His truth. The version where he gave everything and I gave nothing back, where he was the devoted father and I was the ungrateful daughter who married a man with money and forgot about her family. He'd been rehearsing it, I could tell. "I'll be there at 3, he said. "Last chance." He hung up. Theo came home an hour later and found me at the kitchen table. I wasn't crying, I was just done. He sat across from me, looked at my face, waited. "He called again," I said. "I know. He has a whole story ready, about me, about us. Let him tell it." I looked at Theo. "You're not worried at all?" "No." "Why?" He was quiet for a second, then, "Because what's coming is bigger than anything he's prepared for." I put my hands flat on the table. "Tell Theo. The email, Dr. Patricia Owens, 15 people, formal attire." He didn't look surprised that I'd found it. He just looked at me steadily. "I was going to tell you the morning of. I didn't want you carrying it through the week on top of everything else. Tell me, now." Another pause. He leaned forward. "I reached out to some colleagues, people I've worked with, people who know what I do and what it means. I asked them to come, not to make a scene, just to be there, so that when you walk into that room, you're not walking in as Roland Savatier's difficult daughter, you're walking in as yourself." I stared at him. 15 surgeons. 17 now, 2 more confirmed yesterday. I didn't know what to say. "Célestine," his voice was quiet, "your dad has spent 30 years deciding what you're worth. Tomorrow, the people in that room get to see something different. They get to see what I see." My throat tightened. "Which is what?" "Someone who deserved better the whole time." I looked down at the table, pressed my hands flat against the wood to keep them steady. Mum called that night at 9. She was whispering. Dad was in the next room.
He's already called Gerard. He told him you're being selfish, that you cut him out. I know, Mum. He's going to make it very hard tomorrow. I know that too. A long silence. I could hear her breathing. Mum, are you coming? Yes. No hesitation. I wouldn't miss it. But you'll sit with him. The pause before she answered told me everything. He's my husband, Célestine. I don't know how to. I don't have to explain. I understand. And I did. I had understood him my whole life. Understanding it didn't make it hurt less, but I was done waiting for her to choose me. That wasn't something I could keep doing to myself. I'll see you tomorrow, Ma'am. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too. We hung up. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long time. Theo came and sat beside me, didn't say anything, just there. I thought about Dad in that front row tomorrow, suit pressed, story ready, certain he'd already won. I thought about 15 doctors, formal attire, waiting for a signal. And I thought about something Theo said earlier, bigger than anything he's prepared for. I turned off the light. For the first time in months, I slept without waking up once. Tomorrow is the wedding. Dad is in the front row. He thinks it's already over.
I woke up at 6 on the morning of my wedding. The bridal suite at the Fenwick House mansion looked out over the east garden. Stone walls, old oak trees. The kind of place that had seen 100 years of other people's important moments. I stood at the window in my robe and watched the groundskeepers setting up chairs on the lawn below. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad, sent at 6:43. I'm already here, front row. Still not too late to do the right thing. I read it once, deleted it, put the phone face down on the dresser. Mum knocked at 7 with coffee and a box of pastries. She took one look at my face and put everything down and hugged me without saying a word. We stood like that for a long time. It wasn't everything, but it was something. You look beautiful, she said when she pulled back. Mom, you do. She wiped her eyes quickly. You really do. She left at 8 to go sit with Dad. I watched her walk across the garden below, watched her find the front row, watched her sit down next to him. He leaned over and said something to her. She nodded. I turned away from the window and finished getting dressed. By 2:30, the garden was filling. I watched from the upstairs window. 110 guests in their seats. White chairs arranged in rows across the lawn. A stone arch at the far end, draped in white flowers, where Theo would be standing. And there, in the front row on the left side, Dad. Roland Savatier in his best navy suit, hair combed, back straight, already shaking hands with the relatives around him, already performing. So proud of her, I heard him say to someone, his voice carrying up through the open window. This is a big day for our family. I stepped back from the glass. Then I looked at the right side of the garden. They arrived at 2:45, not all at once, in pairs and small groups, quiet and unhurried. Men and women in formal dress, dark suits, some in professional attire I recognized immediately as the kind you wear when you represent something larger than yourself. I counted them from the window. 5, then 8, then 12. 17 in total. They didn't cluster together. They spread across the groom's side, filling in beside Theo's family, beside colleagues I recognized from hospital events. The kind of people who carried themselves a certain way, still, certain, taking up exactly the space they needed and not 1 inch more. The guests around them started noticing. I could see heads turning, quiet conversations shifting. Dad noticed too. He watched the groom's side. his brow pulled together. He leaned toward Mom and said something. She looked, shook her head slightly, didn't know either. He straightened his tie, crossed his arms, uncrossed them. Something had already changed in that garden, and he could feel it. He just didn't know what it was yet. At 2:55, I stood inside the entrance hall of Fenwick House. Stone floors, high ceilings, the kind of quiet that sits in old buildings. Through the heavy double doors, I could hear the string quartet playing. I could hear the murmur of 110 people settling into their seats. The wedding coordinator touched my elbow gently. "Miss Savatier, we're ready when you are." I nodded. She opened the doors a crack, checked the garden, then looked back at me. "You're walking alone?" "Yes." She nodded, professional, kind. "Whenever you're ready." I stood there for a moment. I thought about Dad in that front row, story rehearsed, waiting. I thought about the 17 people on the right side of that garden who had driven here on a Saturday for someone they'd never met because of what Teo had asked, because of what I meant to him. I thought about Teo at the end of the aisle, waiting. The doors opened. I stepped through, and the garden came into full view. The aisle stretched ahead of me, rose petals on the stone path, 110 faces turning. And then something happened that I will spend the rest of my life trying to find the right words for. The 17 stood up. Not scattered, not random, together. One clean movement, like they'd rehearsed it, which I later found out they had. They rose from their seats and stepped into the aisle and formed two lines, facing each other, a corridor, a passage, from the door all the way to the arch. I stopped walking. I couldn't help it. A woman at the front left line caught my eye. Dr. Patricia Owens, the name from the email. She was in her 50s, gray at her temples, the kind of face that had seen hard things and stayed steady through all of them. She gave me one small nod. "Walk." Not out loud, just her eyes, just that. I walked. I walked between them, and I understood what Teo had done. These were not just colleagues. These were people who had stood beside him in operating rooms at 2 a.m, who had watched him work on patients that other surgeons had given up on, who knew exactly what kind of man he was. And because he had chosen me, they were here, standing in two lines on a Saturday afternoon at a mansion in Pasadena, telling a room full of strangers that I was worth showing up for. Halfway down the aisle, I passed the front row. I didn't look at Dad. I didn't need to. But I heard him. A sharp breath, the creak of his chair, a strangled sound that wasn't quite a word. I kept walking. When I reached Teo, he took both my hands. His eyes were bright. "You made it," he said quietly. "You planned this. I planned this. You didn't tell me. I wanted you to feel it." He squeezed my hands. "Not just hear it." Behind us, the 17 returned to their seats. The garden was completely silent for just a moment, the kind of silence that only happens when a room full of people all feel the same thing at the same time. Then the officiant cleared his throat, and I heard it, from the front row, Dad's voice, low and strangled, not meant to carry but carrying anyway. "Who are these people?" His brother Gerard leaned over and said something back. I found out later what it was. "They're his colleagues, Roland. He's not just some doctor. Look at them." Dad looked. Dr. Patricia Owens was already facing forward, calm, composed, the kind of calm that comes from 30 years of making hard decisions. She turned her head once toward the front row, just briefly, the way you glance at something that doesn't quite concern you. Dad looked at her, looked at the others, looked at Teo standing at the altar in his formal suit, the quiet certainty in the way he held himself, the way the 17 moved for him without being asked twice. And something went out of Dad's face. Not anger,
Not embarrassment, not yet. Just the slow collapse of a man who has walked into a room expecting to be the most important person in it and realized too late that he never was. Mum put her hand on his arm. He didn't move. The ceremony was simple. 20 minutes, traditional vows, the exchange of rings. When the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," the garden broke into applause and the 17 stood first, a full standing ovation before anyone else had even gotten to their feet. Dad stayed seated. As Teo and I walked back up the aisle together, I finally let myself look at the front row. Dad was sitting very still, navy suit, hair still combed, but the performance was gone. The handshakes and the proud patriarch routine, all of it just gone. He looked like a man trying to remember the lines to a play he'd been rehearsing for months and finding out the theater had changed the show without telling him. I looked at him for exactly 1 second, then I looked forward, and I walked out of that garden on the arm of my husband with 17 people standing for us, and I did not look back again. The ceremony is over, but the reception is where it really falls apart for Dad.
The reception was inside Fenwick House. High ceilings, long tables, candles on white linen. The kind of room that felt like it had been waiting for something to happen in it. Theo and I had just finished our first dance when Dr. Patricia Owens stood up from her table. She hadn't been scheduled to speak, nobody had asked her to, but when the most senior person in a room stands up, the room notices. It went quiet without anyone asking it to. "I've been a surgeon for 28 years, she said. Her voice didn't need a microphone. In that time, I've worked with a lot of doctors, good ones, difficult ones, ones who were brilliant in the operating room and impossible everywhere else. A few quiet laughs from the medical tables. Theo Moreau is not that. She looked at our table. He is one of the finest reconstructive surgeons I have worked beside, not because of his hands, though his hands are exceptional, because of his judgment, because of who he is when nobody is watching and nothing is at stake except doing the right thing. The room was completely still. Today, I watched him make sure the woman he loves didn't walk into a room alone. She turned to me. "Célestine, you chose a man who shows up, completely, every time. And from what I saw today, you are exactly the kind of woman who deserves that." She raised her glass. "To the bride and groom." The room echoed it, every glass up, applause loud enough to fill those high ceilings. I glanced across to where Dad was sitting. He wasn't clapping. He was staring at the table in front of him, face the color of old concrete. Around him, everyone else had their glasses raised and their eyes on us, and he was the only person in that room sitting perfectly still, doing absolutely nothing. Gerard leaned over and said something to him. Dad didn't respond. He found me an hour into the reception. I was near the end of the long table talking to Theo's aunt when I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned, and there he was. Dad looked smaller than he had that morning. His suit was still pressed, but something had gone out of him. His eyes kept moving around the room like he was checking who was watching. "Célestine," his voice was low, "can we talk for a minute?" I turned to Theo's aunt. "Excuse me." I stepped to the side with him, folded my hands in front of me, waited. "I didn't know," he started, "about Theo, about all of this. If I had known, you would have treated me differently." He stopped. "That's what you mean, Dad. If you'd known Theo was important, you would have treated me differently. That's the whole sentence." His mouth opened, closed. "But here's the thing." I kept my voice level, even. My worth was never about who I married. I was worth treating well when I was paying my own way through college. I was worth treating well when I was making $54,000 a year teaching other people's kids. I was worth it the whole time. He looked at the floor.
I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." He looked up. "Are you sorry for what you asked me, or are you sorry because the room found out?" The silence between us stretched out long and flat. His mouth moved. Nothing came out. "That's what I thought." I straightened up. "I'm not closing the door, Dad, but I'm not holding it open either. That's up to you now." I walked back to my table. I didn't look back. Theo found Dad on the terrace 20 minutes later. I wasn't there. Theo told me about it that night, word for word, the way he always does. Dad was standing alone at the stone railing looking out at the garden, a glass of whiskey in his hand he hadn't touched. He heard Theo come up beside him and didn't turn around. "I suppose I should call you Doctor." His voice was flat, hollow. "You can call me Theo. That's my name." A long silence. "Why didn't you correct me all those months? You let me think you were nobody." "You didn't ask. You asked what I earned. You asked if I could support her. You never asked who I was. I didn't correct you because it wasn't my job to impress you." His jaw tightened. "I'm her father." "Yes." Theo's voice didn't change. "And fathers don't charge their daughters for the privilege of being loved." The words sat there in the night air between them. "Célestine is my wife now," Theo continued. "She doesn't need your approval to be happy. But if you want to know her, if you want to be in her life going forward, that's going to start with you understanding what you actually did, not what you told yourself you did, what you actually did."
Dad said nothing. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Theo walked back inside. Dad stood on that terrace alone for a long time after. The fallout came fast. Before we landed in Hawaii 3 days later, my phone had 42 messages. Not from Dad, from everyone else. Aunt Sylvie, who had called me difficult. "Célestine, I had no idea what your father asked of you. I am so sorry. Please call me." My cousin Rachel. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen at a wedding. Also, your dad is getting absolutely roasted at every family dinner, just so you know." And from Dad's older brother, Gerard, a man who built a construction business from nothing and had no patience for nonsense. "I spoke to your father this morning. I told him what he did was wrong, not bad business, wrong. A man doesn't put a price on his daughter. I want you to know I'm proud of you." 3 family members quietly took their business away from Dad's company in the weeks that followed. One of them had been about to sign on a significant contract. He didn't. Dad had spent years building a reputation as the dependable patriarch, the solid family man, the provider. Now, the story people told about him had changed, and he had no one to blame for that but himself. 6 weeks after the wedding, Mum came to visit. She came alone, that was the first thing. The second was what she said when I opened the door. "I should have protected you. I didn't, and I need you to know that I know that." We sat in the living room for 2 hours. She talked more honestly than I had ever heard her talk, about Dad, about their marriage, about 30 years of keeping the peace until the peace cost everything. "I watched you walk down that aisle, alone, surrounded, and I thought, she chose herself. She actually chose herself." She looked at me with red eyes. "I don't know if I've ever done that, not once." I reached over and took her hand. "It's not too late, Mum." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to believe it. "I've been sleeping in the guest room," she said, quietly, "since the wedding. I don't know what happens next, but I know I can't keep pretending. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm just asking if you can be honest with me, really honest,
not careful. She squeezed my hand. I can try. Then that's enough for now. Dad called 8 weeks after the wedding. I let it ring twice, then I answered. Célestine. His voice was rough, uncertain in a way I hadn't heard before. I want to see you. Okay, I said, but I have conditions. A pause. Conditions? Yes. You don't ask me for anything in exchange for being my father. You don't compare me to Luke, and you treat Theo with basic respect, not because of what he does, because he's my husband. Silence. Those aren't negotiable, Dad. A long breath on the other end. Okay. Okay meaning you'll try, or okay meaning you'll do it? Another pause. I'll do it. Then call me next week and we'll figure out a time. I hung up. Theo looked up from the couch. How do you feel? I thought about it honestly. Like I finally said what I needed to say, and like it's not my job to make sure he heard it. Theo nodded. That's the whole lesson right there. I spent 31 years trying to earn something that was never actually for sale. Dad's approval, his pride, some version of love that came without a price tag attached to it. I worked harder than I needed to. I stayed quieter than I should have. I kept showing up to a table that was never really set for me. And what I know now that I didn't know then is this. You cannot earn love from someone who has decided not to give it. You can only exhaust yourself trying. And at some point, the most important thing you will ever do is stop. Theo didn't rescue me. I want to be clear about that. He didn't fix my family or change who my father was. What he did was simpler. He showed me what it looked like when someone chose you, fully, without conditions, without a transaction attached. And once you've seen that, once you've actually felt it, you cannot go back to accepting anything less. The 17 doctors who stood up in that garden on a Saturday afternoon didn't know me. They knew Theo, they trusted Theo, and because he had chosen me, they stood for me too. That's what it's supposed to look like. Not perfect, not without pain, but real and free. So if you're watching this and you've been where I was, waiting for a parent to finally see you, finally choose you, finally love you without an invoice attached, I want you to say something clearly. You don't have to keep waiting. You are allowed to choose yourself. You were allowed to do that the whole time.